Before I was in the movie business, even before I was a photographer, I was a gas jockey and a mechanic. In the late 50s, people didn't pump their own gas. I did. I was the kid in overalls with an oval badge that said Andy, the one who came out of the office when he heard the ding of the bell that rang when you drove into the station. I walked over to your window and I said, "Fill her up," then asked if you wanted regular or Ethel. Once I had the hose in and the gas flowing, I walked back to your window and asked if you wanted me to check your oil. I did that because I'd been taught to always be on the lookout for TBA, tires, batteries, and accessory sales opportunities. And the way to do that was to get your hood up. This wasn't a scam, by the way. In the 50s, cars needed a lot more service than they do nowadays, and looking under the hood for worn fan belts or corroded battery terminals was both a chance for the station to make a buck and for you to keep your car rolling down the road. In the winter, I cruised the streets with a set of jumper cables looking for cars with their hoods up and guys standing there cursing. You knew they were cursing because you could see the steam coming out of their mouths. Pulling up, I rolled my window down and I said, "Get you going for $5? Maybe 10 if it was a Cadillac, and after some more cursing, they always said yes. Then it was easy. I'd pop my hood, connect the jumpers to the battery, connect them to the other guys, and wait a few minutes while the generator charged his battery. Then I told him to crank it, and after a few spins, the motor usually started. If not, I took a can of ether, sprayed it into the carburetor, and told him to crank it again till it caught. Well, how did I know all this? I knew it because I was born with a mechanical bent. From the time I was small, I taught myself to use tools, to take things apart, and usually to fix them. First bicycles, then motorbikes and scooters, then old cars. Learning a bit here and a bit there until I understood fuel systems and ignitions and all the rest of the things that a car needs to work. I could hear the sounds of a Dragon starter motor. I could give it a whack to get it working again one more time. I could diagnose worn valves or a cracked distributor cap. I was good at this. When I was 15, I started hanging around Bud's gas station with a few other guys. Bud was a vet. He was an easygoing guy and one who let kids be. We hung around Bud's station all day. It seems to me now I live there. We lounged on old cars at the back of the lot and spent hours fixing our ratty motorbikes. And after a while, when we didn't go away, Bud finally put us to use, sending us down into the pits to clean the grease or letting us take care of customers when it got busy. It was an older way of learning things. No schools, no certifications, just one thing at a time, the thing you needed to know right then. But over time it added up. Bud's is where I learned to do a grease job, reaching up into the springs and tie rod ends to pump grease into all the little fittings. I learned to remove the big bolt on the bottom of the oil pan, ready to yank my hand away as the bolt unscrewed and the hot, dirty motor oil flooded out into the catch pan. I learned 100 things without knowing I was learning it all. I was a boy wanting so hard to be a man. Later, I worked for Sam Denon fixing lawnmowers. Sam was an expert on magnetos, high-powered ignition systems that worked without a battery. He was so good at what he did that the Air Force secretly flew him to some island during World War II to prepare the magnetos of bombers that were bombing Japan. But power lawnmowers used magnetos too, and not many people understood them. The end of the war saw thousands of new homes built in the suburbs, and every one of those homes had a lawn, so thousands of power mowers were sold to guys who didn't want to push a real mower. The first summer, those mowers worked great. But after being left in the garage for a long Chicago winter, they usually wouldn't start because the gasoline had gone gummy in the fuel lines. Sam was the guy who could get them going again. Driving around to hardware stores, I picked up all the dead return lawnmowers. I tossed them into the big trailer that was hooked up at Sam's old Cadillac and brought them back to be fixed. That summer, I learned a lot about tuning small engines, and also saw my first pictures of near-naked women posing with fancy hot rods. They were hung on the walls for the mechanics to appreciate, and the men let me be one of them. Later, I worked for a Yamaha dealership fixing motorcycles. It was the perfect job by then because I was also working on movies, but it wasn't yet a full-time job, just a couple weeks here and there, and mainly in winter when the guys I worked for would go down to Florida and make pictures to escape the cold. The last thing a Yamaha dealer in Chicago needed in January was an extra mechanic, so everybody was happy. I had tough, strong hands then with grease under my nails, and I could spin a wrench or torch off a muffler good enough for somebody to pay me. I was proud to be a mechanic, even if the world was starting to look down on people without a degree. And I was happy knowing this was something I could always make a living at, even if my life took me in other directions. The other day I brought our old Mustang convertible into Joe's Mobile to see if Harry, our family's favorite mechanic, could fix the air conditioning. He popped the hood and snapped Freon lines to the intake and purge connectors, and then he cracked the valve on his tank and he ran some Freon in. Then he probed the fuses with a light tester going supply side, then accessory side, watching the light blink on each time, the light telling him which circuits were live. As I watched him work, I realized I knew exactly what he was doing, each step clear to me, and with an understanding of what he was looking for and why. And it came to me that I was still a mechanic, even if I didn't do it anymore. I can't tell you how happy that made me. It's great to do the other things I do, but being a mechanic is a great thing too.